Their stock is underperforming, but they're doubling down in the US. Today we're looking at one of the best trifectas for normal people who want to maximize their rewards, but hate the idea of jumping through hoops. We'll look at the strengths, some of the weaknesses, and some other considerations in the meta. Before we dive into all of that though, big favor is to jump through the hoop of giving this a thumbs up. As much as I hate doing that, it does help with discovery, and if you are new here, consider subscribing. Alright, so why is this setup worth your time? One of the big reasons is that it's relatively affordable. For most of the setups out there, you're looking at $550 to upwards of $1,100, and here it's only $95. One of the other advantages that I'll probably harp throughout the video is that you cover a lot of ground. Number 3 is that one of the biggest expenses, gas, is actually accounted for. For most other setups, you either need to have a business card in order to get multipliers for gas, or you need to deal with rotating categories, which are fine, but it's just not as efficient. With that said, let's look into the setup, and starting off, we have the Citi Double Cash, which is going to be your enforcer. So it's going to enforce that you get at least 2% back on all of your transactions, 1% when you spend and 1% when you pay off the card. The second player is going to be the Citi Custom Cash, which gets you 5% back on your highest spend category and up to $500 every billing period. Categories cover a lot of real life things, which I really like, so gas stations, grocery stores, drug stores, and also select transit. If you're more about discretionaries, then you have select travel, restaurants, select streaming, and also live entertainment. If you're about improvement, then you have fitness clubs and also home improvement. So 5 on up to 500 for the highest spend category. Anything else and anything beyond that is going to be 1%. The Citi Premier is the point guard that makes everything work. This is the one card here that has the annual fee of $95, but you also have no foreign transaction fees, and it does a lot more than you think. You get 3x back on the big 3 of gas stations, grocery stores, and also restaurants. You also get 3x back for air travel and hotels, and 1x back everywhere else. If you are someone that doesn't care about travel, then 3x back is still 3%. Given that, it's a pretty solid option for team cashback and people who maybe want to run a one-card setup. If you're into either sweet spot or aspirational travel, then this card ends up unlocking the potential of those other cards. It makes it so that the cashback that those cards earn will become thank you points, which can then be transferred out to partners, meaning that it has a lot more value. I've talked about this in other videos, but when you do these transfers, you're looking to get about 2 cents per point. In this case, 3x would be 6% return on spend. The 2% of the double cash would really be 2x back, meaning that it's upwards of 4% back. The 5% from the custom cash is 5x, which is upwards of 10%. The 2 cents per point is not a fixed thing, it's based off the prices that you would otherwise have to pay. That's usually why it works so well for business and first, because the prices are pretty expensive. If economy costs 30,000 points, then business will often cost 60,000. So 2 times as many points, which might not be worth it for some people, but the menu price might be 5 or 10 times as much. That's the core of your trifecta, but I would recommend adding a glue guy. With the Rewards Plus, we don't really care about the multipliers or a lot of the other benefits, so the roundup feature is nice, but for our purpose, unless you do a lot of $5 and less transactions, that's not really going to matter. The reason the Rewards Plus is interesting is due to the 10% rebate that you get just by having the card and using the points with any of your other Citi Thank You cards. So for example, if you redeem your points for cash back or if you transfer them out to partners, then you're getting 10% back just by virtue of having this card. So if you do 50, then you're getting 5k back. It is limited to 100,000 points per year, so only 10,000 points rebate, but that's still not bad just by holding a card that doesn't have an annual fee. The big brain question is what would happen if you have, let's say 2, 3, 4 of these, do they stack? From the research that I've done, it doesn't, but it's still a cool idea. Side note, if you do want to learn more about these cards or pretty much any other cards out there and you want to support the channel, we do have links on our website, AskSebby.com, and also down below in the description box. It's a huge way to support the channel, so thank you guys in advance. The Citi Trifecta and potentially plus one is my recommendation for the no-nonsense setup. So if you're a professional, if you have a newborn, if you're someone who just doesn't like hoops, then this is your setup. One of the big benefits of this setup is that you have a ton of optionality. So if you decide to move into a different setup, maybe go back one or go forward one to a more expensive one, then you can just downgrade the Citi Premier into a second or into a third custom cash. With a lot of other setups, you don't really have that choice. You have to do a keep or cancel decision due to the annual fees. Or maybe you can downgrade it, but you're still paying an annual fee and it's just a lot harder to stomach. It's also great for gas, which I keep harping on because that's a real pain point for people. Yes, there have been other issuers that have offered gas as maybe a higher category, but most of them don't really keep it because they just can't justify it. With a big bank, they can actually choose to lose money here and make money elsewhere. If you're a credit union or startup offering this, it's just harder to justify it long term. You use it for marketing and then you cut it off afterwards. All right, so now that I've sold you on the setup and why it makes so much sense, let's talk about some of the weaknesses. Number one is that it's no frills, but that's a double-edged sword. With most of the other big cards, the thing that we see them adding is lounge access and all of these other cool perks for people doing cool things. Were you at Art Basel? Were you skiing in Tahoe? Were you at that party? So if you're that person, then this setup is not that interesting. With that said though, especially for lounges, the easy solution is just to add another card specifically for that purpose. There's a few options out there that are $95 and you get maybe 10 visits. It pretty much just becomes a math equation on whether a card makes sense and you can add and remove it as necessary. Kind of like adding insurance to something if you are worried. That leads into number two, which is the lack of insurances. Back in the day, a few years ago, Citi was the king of protections. They had all the delay, cancellation, lost protections that you can think of that you'll see across the screen. The Citi Prestige also had the best in class trip delay protection at 3 hours compared to everyone's 6 hours. With its current setup and the iteration of benefits, you would either need to buy it separately or maybe don't have any protection. Alternatively, similar to the first point, you can just add a card for this and use that specifically for that purpose. On a note of travel, number three is that the Citi Trifecta is a bit weak for normal economy travelers. So even though 3x can be potentially worth 6% return on spend, if you are more economy focused, it's probably going to look more like 3%. Yes, there's the idea of sweet spots, but either it might not apply or you don't want to do the research. For example, I can tell you that if you want to go to Hawaii, transfer your thank you points to Virgin in order to book Delta, and that's a pretty good sweet spot. But most of you are probably not going to do the legwork to research how that works. Okay, so you can tell that the weaknesses very much center around travel. The benefit is that they're all relatively addressable, or they might be non-factors. With that said though, I think there's three big questions or elephants in the room. The first one is, what about the Prestige card? So this is a card that previously existed and I guess technically still exists if you have it, but it's not open to new applicants and you can't product change to it. In its heyday, it was one of the best, if not the best, travel card out there in terms of benefits and protections and also multipliers. We talked about a lot of weaknesses, but do they plan to relaunch a card that covers those weaknesses? Or is this a card that's never going to return? Or if it does return, is it dramatically and materially different? The second elephant is, why is there not a business add-on to this setup? So for pretty much everyone else, you can add additional business cards that will focus on categories like office supplies and especially advertisement. This is a good and bad thing because yes, they don't have it, but they have the potential to add it. Also, a reminder that I feel like I need to make is that you can use personal cards for business expenses. You can still deduct it against your business as expenses. There's no problem here. The third elephant in question, and the more interesting one to me, is how is Citi going to make money? So yes, they quit the rat race and that makes sense for them, but how are they going to maximize what they're doing? Are they going to stick in this niche? And if they do, how do they turn a profit from it? With a lot of the other expensive setups and cards, they're either trying to cross-sell you to other products, so maybe mortgages or other loans, or they are buying credits for pennies on the dollar. In effect, they're a marketing firm that has a very high market clientele. The interesting thing too is that what we're seeing on the card level, we're also seeing on the corporate company level. Citi's CEO is reorganizing strategy for 2022 as profits drop 26%. One interesting thing I found is that they're either selling off or winding down some of their international pieces. So for example, for South Korea as well as Australia, they realized that it didn't make sense. It sounds like they were spread a bit too thin. But the interesting thing for us is that they are doubling down branches in their top 6 US metro markets. Maybe I'm crazy, but for us as consumers, I feel like there's a bigger end game and something big is coming. Overall, I feel like they're pretty well positioned and there's a lot of play of their cards, so I'm looking forward to it. Again, if you want to learn about cards, we have links on the website, AskSebby.com, and also down below in the description box. My question for you is, what are your thoughts on this setup? What do you like? What don't you like? And is it a setup you would either run or are you currently running it? Let me know and everyone else know in the comments down below. If you're still watching, feel free to put a basketball emoji down below so I'll heart it. And let me know if you are okay with basketball analogies. I feel like I use those a lot. All right, Mandy is putting her shoes on and I think we need to leave, but hope you guys liked it. See you guys next time.